Hello, I'm Harley Schlanger from the Schiller Institute. Welcome to our webcast with our founder and chairman, Helga Zepp LaRouche. It is July 22nd, 2020. There are so many things going on, both with good potential and with very dangerous potential. As we always like to do, we're going to start from the top, get the big picture. And Helga, you have a report from a Russian expert that I think would set the stage for the discussion we're about to have. So, what do you have from this Russian expert?
Well, this is actually an Asia expert at the Far East University of Vladivostok, and his name is Artyom Lukin. And I quote him because I think it is quite a accurate characterization of the situation. He says, as we cross into the second half of 2020, there is little hope left that our misfortunes will end when this annus horribilis goes out. We may be entering one of the most cataclysmic and fateful periods in the history of humankind. He says this crisis has been building for years. It probably started or escalated in 2008, and when the corona crisis hit, it really went into a situation where he thinks it will lead to split societies, ungovernability of much in the West. And he thinks there is a classic revolutionary situation in the present day international system. A vacuum in governance will lead to more chaos in global politics. And he thinks that China may be the only island of stability. Now, I'm not sharing his pessimistic outlook, but I think the description of the situation is quite accurate. However, since we are not looking at history, as observers, but we are trying to change it and intervene, I think there is hope, but it requires really a Hercules kind of intervention.
Well, to start with, let's take a look at the what's going on between the US and China, which has been cascading downhill recently, and there's been a real escalation in the last days.
Well, I think the news from today are quite shocking, and that is that the US government asked China to close down its consulate in Houston, with so far not exactly specified accusations. But, I mean, this is a traumatic act, and rumors, which are rumors at this point, uh, are flying high that China may close down a consulate somewhere in China. And this is really bad. If you have the two most important economies in the world going into this kind of escalation, it forebodes very, very badly. And naturally, the key element, or unfortunately not the only one, but maybe the most uh, strongest warmonger in all of that, is naturally Pompeo, who is presently in Great Britain. He met with Boris Johnson, Dominic Raab, the foreign minister, but he also met with the Nathan Law, an opposition figure from Hong Kong. But he also met Chris Patten, the last governor of Hong Kong before it was turned over to the mainland China. And he met with the Henry Jackson Society, where he gave a speech where he went so far to say that the head of the World Health Organization, Dr. Tedros, was bought by the Chinese, and that he therefore was responsible for the spread of coronavirus and deaths in Great Britain. I mean, these are wild accusations. And, I mean, fortunately, Boris Johnson did not buy into this the whole way. He said that he is not going to turn into a xenophobic, knee-jerk person, because China is going to be around for a very long time, and even the world of our children and grandchildren will be confronted with an large, powerful China, and therefore he's not going to go all the way in this anti-China campaign. But what Pompeo stressed and what was the tenor of his entire verbiage which he expressed in this visit and in tweets and so forth, he said, that he was so glad to be back in London, which is the the essence of the UK-US special relationship, the closest ally. Now this takes a nerve because we are right now about to expose the British authorship of the entire coup against Trump. So it's very clear that Trump is meeting with the same circuits of British intelligence, of which the Henry Jackson Society is just, one arm of the neocons, who were the first ones, by the way, who had demanded this outrageous demand that China should pay £9 trillion for the damage caused by the corona pandemic worldwide. So Pompeo is meeting with the very same British intelligence circuits or intelligence-related circuits who are behind the coup attempt against Trump. Now, I think this is a very tricky game, and I think we have a lot to say about that in the next day, as a matter of fact, tomorrow.
Well, and this is crucial because what we'll be presenting tomorrow is a press conference by Bill Binney, probably one of the world's foremost cybersecurity experts, who will show definitively, as he has before, but definitively at this press conference, that the whole Russiagate story was fabricated based on a lie of Russian meddling and Russian hacking. And for our viewers, this will be at 11 a.m. tomorrow, July 23rd, on LaRouche PAC and the Schiller Institute websites. Now, Helga, one of the reasons this is so important, as you pointed out, is that Binney met with Pompeo at President Trump's request when Pompeo was CIA director and showed him the forensic evidence that there was no Russian hacking. So this is an excellent way of flanking this whole anti-Russia, but also that's spilling over into the anti-China. It's the exact same networks.
Well, one should note that this happened already in October 2017, so in the first year of the Trump presidency. And this meeting occurred at the request of President Trump, who asked Pompeo to receive Binney. They met for 1 hour. Binney, in this meeting, which he presented many times in some of our programs at LaRouche PAC and other websites, you can look into the archive and find these. Binney presented Pompeo with the forensic evidence that it was completely impossible that there was a Russian hack, because the forensic data demonstrated very clearly that this was downloaded by an insider in the Democratic Party, or that's the assumption, but it was downloaded on either a thumb drive or a stick or some other storage device, and that therefore the entire foundation of Russiagate was a lie and fraudulent. Now, Pompeo listened to all of this, and what did he do? Absolutely nothing. He did not report to President Trump about the meeting. He did not start an investigation. He did not recommend the Congress to start an investigation, but he was sitting on this information and, knowingly let the whole 3 years of Russiagate, the Mueller report, the impeachment, all of this happen while he could have stopped it basically immediately after the meeting with Binney. And therefore, the question is the cui bono. It seems that sometimes Trump is somehow making a difference between Pompeo and Bolton. About Bolton, whom he kicked out, he said, that if he would have left Bolton in, there would have been already World War VI. This was a couple of months ago. We probably would have World War X by now. But, if you look at the policies, then whatever Bolton is saying and has been saying and doing it is absolutely identical to Pompeo. As a matter of fact, Pompeo is maybe even more outrageous, and given his fundamentalist beliefs, who knows what is the ulterior motive? Maybe he thinks an Armageddon is a good thing. His policies, for sure, are risking, to escalate the confrontation with China. He will give a speech shortly after his return to the Nixon Library, Presidential Library, about the communist China and the future of the world, or something like that. But he is on a complete rampage. He gave a speech to the governors of the United States in February, where he, totally outside of his mandate as Secretary of State, basically threatened these governors, saying that they will have all kinds of misfortunes if they don't cut the ties with China. And he was the strongest voice in accusing China of taking over the world, of all kinds of things. Naturally, he's not the only one, but you had the speeches by Esper, who is pushing the Indo-Pacific confrontation against China, who is even accusing the PLA and the Chinese Communist Party that they are responsible for the present border clashes with India. And naturally, you have people like Navarro and other people around from the cabinet of Trump, who are all on this anti-China escalation. Now, this is very bad. It can, if it's not stopped, it can only lead to a disaster. First of all, it's not true. The Chinese government immediately responded to these accusations by saying that they have no intention to take over the role of the United States as the world hegemon, that all they are trying to do is to develop a different model of peaceful cooperation among nations based on cooperation and a win-win approach. And if you look at the substance of it, it is absolutely true. And one can only hope that the present tirades which are coming from Pompeo, that President Trump can actually see what this is. It's an effort, to get him involved in a conflict, which maybe this changes. So tune in this press conference with Binney, because in the same way, like if we can absolutely demonstrate to the world that the entire anti-Russia campaign is based on lies, maybe some people will realize that the same method of geopolitical confrontation is also being applied against China, and that we can actually go back to a more normal kind of discussion of diplomacy and negotiations about all issues, and not this, frankly, extremely dangerous kind of escalation.
So again, the Binney press conference will be Thursday, July 23rd at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. Now, one of the things that I've had several people ask me, what could Pompeo have done after talking with Binney? Pompeo was the CIA director at the time. Had he come out and said the CIA under his predecessor, John Brennan, was involved in a coup attempt against the President of the United States with fraudulent charges against Russia, that would have blown the whole thing up. He didn't do it, so those people who are trying to make excuses for him ought to stop. Now, also on this embrace of the special relationship and our great relationship with the United Kingdom, it should be noted that Christopher Steele of the dossier, which was used to launch the FBI FISA warrant process to spy on the Trump campaign, Steele was just fined by a judge in London, charged with lying about 2 Russians. There's a lot more coming out on Steele, and Helga, we have the comment from Mark Meadows that he thinks it will be soon that Durham's investigation will be wrapped up, and that this will put some people under indictment. What can you say about that?
Well, yeah, the whole world, or at least those interested in strategic developments, have been waiting for the Barr and Durham investigations to produce results. Now, the White House Chief of Staff just said this is coming out soon. And as you said, he says there is so much evidence that a lot of people will be indicted and go to jail. Now, that would be very good. It is also very clear that Christopher Steele, who was at the center of Russiagate, he wrote this slimy, dodgy dossier, which was really used to kickstart the whole Russiagate campaign. That it is now mentioned by Richard Grenell, who is the acting director of national intelligence, that it was clear to the intelligence community very early on that there was something fundamentally wrong with that dossier, that there were red flags, that you couldn't trust the information therein. So nevertheless, this has been dragging on. And it was mentioned by a very interesting article by John Solomon already last week, that there is this court evidence from this court case in London against Steele, which, according to the documents which he read, we have not been able to obtain them yet, but I'm quoting this Solomon, that there is much proof about the criminal behavior of the FBI, that they have lied to the FISA court, that they have actually used all kinds of methods, and that the origin of the hiring of Christopher Steele was Hillary Clinton. Now, that is very interesting because that brings it right back to the Obama administration and forebodes not exactly well for the sleepy candidate Joe Biden. So I think this is all going to be very interesting, and the stakes are obviously extremely high. So if you want to know everything which can be known about this, tune in tomorrow, 11 o'clock US time, 5 o'clock European Central European time, and we may have some surprises which are not yet entirely secure, but also, given the fact that surprises are surprises, I'm not going to reveal what it is, but it will be big. So you better tune in tomorrow.
As we're reviewing the strategic situation, what's the other thing that's looming, which is part of the strategic situation, is the financial collapse. There was an extraordinary summit, extraordinary in that it took so long and it didn't came out with nothing, but of the European Council in the last few days, which after all this Sturm und Drang, what it looks like they're going to do is go into a big Green New Deal funding scam. What happened at this conference, Helga?
Well, this is quite amazing. What it finally ended up with is the not so small sum of 1.8 trillion euro over the next year. This is both the next budget of the EU, but also the 750 billion rescue package, the pandemic emergency purchase program. And there was a huge fight where for 4 days and 4 nights, 27 heads of European states were discussing, where the so-called Frugal Four, that is Austria, Denmark, Holland, and Sweden, and then it became 5 with Finland in addition. They did not like the idea that there should have been 500 billion grants to the southern European countries who were hit so hard by the pandemic, like Italy, Spain in particular. So they negotiated very hard. Then there were fallouts between the Hungarian Prime Minister Orban and the Dutch head of state Rutte. And it was quite ugly, shouting matches. And then finally, they made a compromise whereby they reduced the sum of 500 billion grants to only 390 billion. But attached to this are absolutely horrible conditions. Italy, for example, in order to have any access to some of this money, They must impose more austerity on health. Can you imagine that in the middle of a pandemic, this EU demands more cuts in the health expenses, which is insane, more cuts in the pensions, more cuts in the labor cost. So it is a terrible, terrible result. And it is also pretty useless. That was the judgment of the economist Michele Geraci, former Undersecretary of State of Commerce, who has spoken at a recent Schiller Institute conference. And he said this is completely useless because this will only kick in 6 to 7 months in 2021. And who knows where the world will be 6 or 7 months from now, which is obviously absolutely the case. And he said that it's also not going to come in large sums, but only at 3 to 5 billion euros at a time, which is peanuts. And he said, in a crisis like that, it is speed of the response which is of the essence. And look at the Asian countries, how they responded very quickly, and that's how they are doing much better. So this EU has no unity. It's a rotten compromise. They continue with the same austerity policy. And what is the worst of it, this is all part of the Green Deal, of the decarbonization of the economy, going to lower energy flux density in the production. And therefore, it is another deindustrialization, and it will be the end of the European nations as industrial nations if they are allowed to continue to do that. Now, I think as the world is in a complete tumultuous situation, that may not hold. I think, the EU, if they continue on that course, they will put themselves on the sidelines of history. But this is a terrible, terrible thing because it's all the way green. It's going to be an absolute destruction for Germany, for other industrial nations of Europe. So I can only hope that there are some people who recognize that we need an alternative. The Schiller Institute is providing that. We have produced this 1.5 billion job program, whereby 50 million jobs are supposed to be created in Europe, productive jobs. And we will update that report shortly. And then people can see that there is actually an alternative way to go.
And one aspect of the situation in Germany was the announcement by ThyssenKrupp, the major steel producer, that they're going to put 32,000 workers on part-time because of the collapse of auto sales in the auto industry. So this whole EU policy will do nothing to reverse that. Now, one other aspect of the crash that's coming, we see the situation in Argentina coming to a head with the inability to work out an agreement to roll over long-term debt. What's the latest on Argentina?
Well, the Argentine finance minister Guzman basically said that the recent offer by the Argentine government is the last one which they are going to make. Some creditor groups already accepted the conditions, fearing that if they refuse it, they may end up with getting nothing. But it is BlackRock and other such vultures who demand that the Argentine government should make more cuts, and they just said they will not do that because if they agree to a deal which does not allow for the Argentine economy to grow and create new jobs and industrial capacities, they will not be in a position to ever pay back any debt. And I think it would be wise to remember the conditions of the Versailles Treaty. In a recent extremely important article by President Putin on the origins and prehistory of World War II, he had again pointed the finger to the Versailles Treaty as having created the conditions for the rise of Hitler and then naturally leading into World War II. And one should remember that any kind of agreement which does not give a way out, as it not gave a way out for Germany after the First World War, or what now the vultures are demanding from Argentina, it always leads to a catastrophe if the greedy forces of the vulture funds and hedge funds and so forth are insisting to get an even ever bigger part of the loot. So one can only say that the Argentine government is doing the right thing. But naturally, we are sitting on a powder keg. The whole system is completely indebted. It's the emerging markets, it's the corporate debt, it's the threatening insolvency of many small and medium firms in all of Europe, the following banking crash. So we are sitting on an absolute powder keg, which is why we absolutely have to free President Trump from this coup. We will see how far we get in that tomorrow, and then organize for the summit, which has been called by President Putin, and all the four other members of the permanent five of the UN Security Council have already agreed that they will participate. But naturally, all these actions by Pompeo, by the British, by Esper, to create such a horrible confrontation with Russia and China are designed to make the climate for such a summit so horrible that nothing good can come out. So that is what is at stake, because this summit is probably the last chance before this cataclysmic period enters, which Mr. Lukin had warned about. And that is why, the efforts must be really made to clear the air and go back to an atmosphere of cooperation between the United States, Russia, and China in particular, because we are sitting on such an incredible powder keg.
I think we can end with an interesting and positive note. With all the confusion that's been deliberately pumped out around the whole coronavirus pandemic, is it a flu? Is it a cold? Is it a real pandemic? Blah, blah, blah. President Trump did an interesting about face the other day. What can you tell us about that?
Well, I think this is one of the best developments, and we had said that the only way out of this situation is that President Trump must take the lead. And he did, say that wearing a mask is a patriotic thing to do. I think this is very good because, yesterday in a press briefing, he pointed to the fact that the virus is spreading, especially in the south and south east, southwest, and that basically this is a thing which will be with us for some time, and that he called on people to wear masks where social distancing is not possible. Now, I think this is very good. Also, Lindsey Graham made a remark which is useful, because it means that some of the Republicans are also, working towards not having this ridiculous politicization of the virus, where the Democrats wear masks and the Republicans don't wear masks, which is insane in light of this danger. Lindsey Graham said it's not a big deal. You're not asked, when you're asked to wear a mask, you're not asked to go to Afghanistan and die. It's just common sense. And I think that anybody who does have common sense comes to the same conclusion. And I'm very happy that President Trump changed his mind, because it is not too late yet to implement the kinds of measures which some countries have implemented. It's very difficult now because it's so far spread. But if you are absolutely rigorous in testing a lot, many times, if you impose tracing, isolation, and you implement all the health measures which one should implement when there is a pandemic, I think there is a possibility to bring it under control, as the many countries in Asia have demonstrated, and even Germany, which did some major mistakes in the beginning, by not responding to the warnings coming from China. I mean, there is all this talk that China would have caused the spread of the virus by telling it too late. The point is, the German government did not listen when China and the World Health Organization warned about it late January, but they were very slow in getting the masks, in getting the ventilators. And, I think it should stop now with the blame game, because, if somebody is to blame, probably many mistakes were made, but that's the nature of a pandemic, which is new. This virus has many features which people still don't totally understand. And therefore, if there were mistakes made in the beginning, it's horrible and it's tragic. But, I think the blame game must stop, and all efforts must be concentrated on working together internationally, because this is a pandemic and it does require enormous efforts. I have said many times, we need a decent modern health system in every single country on this planet, because there is no guarantee that if the third world remains poor and undergoes famines, that you will not have a new pandemic any time soon. And the only defense against that is to have a healthy living standard. People must be more well nourished, and you need a modern health system in every country. So I think this is very good that President Trump made that step, and he should be applauded for it.
Let me remind people then, as we close, that we need you to work with us to build the visibility of this press conference tomorrow with Bill Binney, the former National Security Agency Technical Director, who will present the definitive case as to why there was no Russian hacking in the 2016 election, which means that everyone who keeps talking about Russian hacking, including Biden, who said the Russians are already meddling in 2020, they will be exposed as liars, corrupt, and out to destroy the United States. So join us 11 a.m. tomorrow, the 23rd of July, for the Binney press conference. With that, Helga, I guess we've reached the end, so we'll see you next week.
Yes, till next week.